The crystal cities of Zephr Prime floated like jewels in the gas giant's rings. Each building caught the light from 3 distant suns and threw rainbows across the peaceful streets. Elder Kethvara moved through the Grand Council chambers with grace. Her crystalline body hummed with soft music as she walked. The Zephirians had known peace for over 1,000 years. That peace ended when the first distress signal arrived. The message came from Korath 7, a mining world on the outer edge of Coalition space. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the terror in the voice was clear. Commander Jake Morrison was 3 light-years away when his ship picked up the signal. He was leading a small Earth exploration team through the sector when the alien words filled his communication center. "This is Korath 7 calling anyone who can hear us." They came without warning. Ships like black daggers cutting through space. Our shields mean nothing to them. They adapt to everything we throw at them. Please, if anyone receives this message, warn the Coalition. The Kreks are coming. The signal cut to static. Morrison stood in the command center of his ship, the Horizon. He was a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes. Years of military service had taught him to stay calm when others panicked. His crew looked at him for orders. "Dr. Grant, what do you know about these Kreks?" Morrison asked. Lisa Grant pulled up her xenobiology files on the main screen. She was younger than Morrison, with red hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her specialty was studying alien life forms, but the Kreks were new to her. "Not much, Commander. They're from the far rim of the galaxy. Reports say they're warriors, but we've never had direct contact. The few ships that encountered them never came back." Captain Roy Henderson, who commanded the ship, looked worried. "Should we investigate, sir?" Morrison studied the star charts. Korath 7 was only 6 hours away at full speed. "Set course for their last known position and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we may have found something big." The Horizon jumped to faster than light speed. When they arrived at Korath 7, they found nothing but debris. The planet was still there, but its cities were gone. Massive craters covered the surface where the mining facilities used to be. There were no survivors. "My God," Dr. Grant whispered, as she studied the readings. The entire population was wiped out in less than 12 hours. What kind of weapons could do this? Morrison activated the long-range scanners. "Look for any trace of the attackers. I want to know what we're dealing with." 3 days later, another signal reached them. This time it came from Elder Kethvara herself on Zephr Prime. The Coalition's leader had called an emergency session of the High Council. Her voice carried across space with the weight of desperation. "Citizens of the galaxy, we face a threat unlike any in our recorded history. The Kreks Empire has begun a systematic campaign of extermination against our people. They strike without warning and show no mercy. Our most advanced weapons cannot penetrate their defenses. Our strongest shields collapse under their assault." Morrison listened to the transmission with growing concern. He had fought in wars before, but this sounded different. The Zephirians were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology. If they couldn't defend themselves, what chance did anyone have? The Elder's voice continued. "We have lost 7 worlds in the past month. Millions of our people are dead. Our scientists estimate we have perhaps 60 days before they reach our core systems. We are not warriors. We have never learned the art of violence. But we will not surrender to extinction." Dr. Grant was studying everything the Coalition had gathered about the Kreks. The information was limited, but terrifying. The Kreks were tall creatures over 8 feet in height with thick armored skin and multiple arms. They felt no pain and showed no fear. Their ships could adapt to any weapon used against them within minutes. "They're like a virus," Grant explained to Morrison. "They consume worlds for resources and move on. They've wiped out entire civilizations across the outer rim. The Zephirians are just their latest target." Henderson brought up tactical displays of the Kreks ships. "Look at this design, Commander. No beauty, no wasted space. These ships exist only to kill and destroy. Whoever built them has been fighting wars for a very long time." Morrison studied the images. The Kreks vessels looked like black spears covered in weapons. They had no windows, no decorations, nothing that wasn't designed for combat. "How many ships do they have?" Intelligence estimates at least 300 capital ships, plus support vessels. They travel in fleets of 20 to 30 ships and strike multiple targets at once. The final part of Elder Kethvara's message brought silence to the command center. Her crystalline voice carried across the stars with the sound of breaking hope. To any civilization capable of rendering aid, we make this plea. Our people face extinction. We offer all our knowledge, all our resources, all our technology to those who would stand against this darkness. We do not ask for charity. We ask for alliance. Help us survive, and we will share everything we have learned in our 1,000 years of peace. Morrison looked at his crew. They were good people, scientists and explorers who had signed up to study the galaxy, not fight wars. But they were also human, and humans had never been good at walking away from those who needed help. "Sir," Henderson said quietly, "Earth Command hasn't authorized us to get involved in alien conflicts." "No, they haven't," Morrison agreed. "Dr. Grant, how long would it take to reach Zephr Prime?" "About 14 days at maximum speed." Morrison made his decision. "Set course for the Coalition capital and send a message to Earth. Tell them we're going to help." As the horizon changed course, Morrison thought about what they were flying into. The Zephirians had called them a primitive species when first contact was made 2 years ago. Humans used chemical rockets while the Coalition had, mastered faster than light travel centuries ago. Human weapons were crude projectiles compared to Zephirian energy beams. But Morrison had learned something in his years of military service. Advanced technology didn't always win wars. Sometimes it was the simple, brutal solutions that worked. When elegant ones failed, Dr. Grant joined him at the observation window as stars streaked past. "Commander, what can we possibly do that the Zephirians can't? They're centuries ahead of us in every field of science." Morrison watched space flow around them. "Maybe that's the problem, Doctor. They've been peaceful for 1,000 years. They've forgotten how to fight dirty." "And we haven't?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Earth has been trying to kill us for 300,000 years. We learned to kill it back. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned what that means." The horizon raced through space toward Zephr Prime, carrying the hopes of a dying civilization. Behind them, more Earthships received the Coalition's plea and changed course to follow. Humanity was about to answer the call for help. The Krex Empire had never faced creatures from a death world before. They were about to learn that some prey fought back harder when cornered, and humans, more than any other species in the galaxy, knew how to be dangerous when they had something to protect. Elder Kethvara's plea had reached the stars. Now the Deathworlders were coming to answer it. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephr system. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the beautiful gas giant grow larger on the screen. The crystal cities floating in the planet's rings sparkled like diamonds against the darkness of space. "Incoming transmission from Zephr Prime," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the communication station. She was a skilled pilot with short blonde hair and quick reflexes. "Elder Kethvara requests permission to come aboard." Morrison nodded. "Grant them docking clearance. And Amy, make sure our weapons are powered down. We don't want to look threatening." "Doctor," Grant stood beside Morrison, studying the readings from their sensors. "Commander, look at these energy signatures. Their entire civilization runs on pure stellar energy. No pollution, no waste, no environmental damage. It's incredible." Captain Henderson joined them at the main display. "It's also completely defenseless. I'm not reading any military installations, no weapon platforms, nothing that could stop an invasion force." 20 minutes later, Elder Kethvara materialized on the horizon's transporter pad. Morrison had seen images of Zephirians before, but meeting one in person was different. She stood 7 feet tall, her body made of living crystal that sang, with soft musical tones as she moved. Light passed through her transparent form, creating patterns of color that shifted with her emotions. "Commander Morrison," she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "we are grateful that you answered our call, though I must admit we expected something different." Morrison extended his hand in greeting, then remembered that Zephirians didn't have physical contact customs. "Different how, Elder?" "Your ships, appear quite primitive to our sensors. Chemical rockets, projectile weapons, metal armor instead of energy shields. We had hoped for allies with technology that could match the Kreks. Dr. Grant stepped forward. Elder Keth Vara, we may not have your advanced technology, but we have experience with warfare. Perhaps we could learn about your enemy and find a way to help. The elder's crystal body dimmed slightly, a sign of sadness among her people. Follow me to our council chambers. You must see what we face. The human delegation took a shuttle to Zephr Prime's main city. Morrison brought along Sergeant Pete Collins, a tough Marine from Alaska, who had fought in 3 different conflicts. Professor Carl Newton, a military strategist, also joined them to study Kreks tactics. The Crystal City was beyond anything the humans had imagined. Buildings grew like living trees, their walls transparent and filled with flowing light. Gardens floated in midair, tended by gentle machines that worked in perfect harmony. There were no weapons anywhere, no guards, no defensive structures. Beautiful, Dr. Grant whispered as they walked through streets that sang beneath their feet. And completely undefended, Sergeant Collins observed. His trained eyes automatically looked for cover positions and escape routes. One squad of Marines could take this entire district. Elder Keth Vara led them to the High Council chambers, where holographic displays showed the current state of the war. Red markers indicated worlds that had fallen to the Kreks. The pattern was clear and terrifying. They strike 3 or 4 targets at once, explained Council Member Zephr, another crystalline being with purple highlights in his structure. By the time we can respond to one attack, they have already destroyed 2 more worlds. Professor Newton studied the tactical displays with interest. What kind of resistance have you offered? Our most advanced warships responded to every attack, Zephr replied. We have energy weapons that can destroy asteroids, shields that can deflect stellar radiation, and ships that can travel between stars in days. And none of it worked? Elder Keth Vara activated a recording from one of the battles. The humans watched as elegant Zephirian ships fired beams of pure energy at black Kreks vessels. The alien warships absorbed the first attacks, then their hulls began to change. Within minutes, the energy weapons became useless. They adapt, the elder explained. Whatever we use against them, they counter within a short time. Our scientists believe they use some form of reactive technology that learns from each attack. Morrison leaned forward. What about changing tactics mid-battle? We tried that. They adapt to new weapons almost as quickly as the first ones. Sergeant Collins spoke up. Elder, have you tried using multiple different weapons at the same time? The Zephirian leaders looked confused. Why would we do that? We always use our host advanced technology. Because, Collins said with a grin, sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't expect. Dr. Grant was studying biological data about the Kreks themselves. According to this, they don't feel pain, they heal quickly, and they're incredibly strong. But Commander, look at this behavioral analysis. Morrison read the data. The Kreks fought in predictable formations. They always used the same attack patterns. Their tactics never varied except to counter new weapons. They're not creative, Morrison realized. They react to threats, but they don't anticipate them. Professor Newton nodded. Classic mistake of an over-specialized military. They're perfect at what they do, but only what they do. Elder Keth Vara's crystal form brightened with hope. You see something we missed? Maybe, Morrison said. We need to see one of these attacks in person. Are there any Kreks forces in the area? A scouting fleet was detected near the Helios system, 3 days from here. But Commander, you cannot face them with your primitive weapons. Morrison smiled. Elder, our weapons might be primitive, but we've had a lot of practice using them. 2 days later, the human ship Horizon waited in the asteroid field near Helios 4. The planet below was a Zephirian research station with a small population. Long-range sensors had detected Kreks ships approaching. Contact, reported Amy Foster, from the pilot's seat. 5 Kreks vessels closing on the research station. Morrison activated the ship's communication system. "This is Commander Morrison to Zephirian Station. Begin evacuation procedures immediately." On the planet's surface, the Zephirian researchers scrambled to escape. Their evacuation ships were beautiful but slow, easy targets for the approaching Krex warships. "The Krex are targeting the civilian ships," Henderson reported. "They'll be in weapons range in 6 minutes." Morrison made his decision. "Amy, take us in. Sergeant Collins, prepare boarding teams. Professor Newton, are you ready to see how humans fight?" The horizon accelerated toward the Krex ships. The alien vessels immediately detected the human ship and changed course to intercept. Their black hulls bristled with weapons that had never failed to destroy an enemy. "They're scanning our weapon systems," Dr. Grant reported. "Energy signatures suggest they're preparing to adapt to our armament." "Good," Morrison said. "Let them scan all they want. Amy, bring us in close." The first Krex ship fired a beam of superheated plasma at the horizon. The human ship's crude metal armor absorbed the hit and kept flying. The Krex fired again, expecting their weapon to punch through the primitive defense dot. Instead, the horizon returned fire with a railgun that launched a solid metal slug at tremendous speed. The projectile punched through the Krex ship's hull like paper. Before the aliens could adapt, the humans switched to missiles loaded with high explosives. The Krex ships began to change their defenses, but Morrison had already given new orders. "Amy, ramming speed. Collins, prepare for boarding action." What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations. The human ship deliberately crashed into a Krex vessel, and armed Marines poured through the breach. The Krex warriors were 8 feet tall and incredibly strong, but they had never faced humans in close combat. Sergeant Collins led his squad through corridors filled with alien warriors. The Krex expected to overwhelm these small creatures with brute force. Instead, they found themselves fighting opponents who used teamwork, improvised weapons, and dirty tricks that no honorable warrior would consider. The humans fought like pack hunters, covering each other and striking at weak points. When their rifles ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When the knives broke, they used their fists and anything else they could grab. Most shocking to the Krex was what happened when humans got hurt. Pain didn't stop them. It made them angry. It made them fight harder. Within an hour, 2 Krex ships were destroyed and a third was captured. The remaining vessels retreated, carrying reports that would change everything the Krex thought they knew about warfare. Elder Kethvara's message reached Morrison as the horizon limped back to Zephr Prime. "Commander, our sensors recorded the entire battle. How did you defeat them so easily?" Morrison looked at his exhausted crew. Half of them were wounded, but they were all smiling. "Elder, we didn't defeat them easily. We defeated them human style, and that makes all the difference." News of the human victory spread across Krex space faster than their ships could travel. General Vex Thule stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the battle recordings for the 10th time. His massive form towered over the control stations, 8 feet of armored muscle and cybernetic enhancements. The general's forearms moved across different control panels as he studied the data. His species had conquered 47 different civilizations in the past century. None had ever defeated a Krex fleet in open combat. But these humans had destroyed 2 ships and captured a third in less than an hour. "Explain this to me," Vex Thule demanded from his tactical officer. "How did creatures half our size defeat our warriors in hand-to-hand combat?" The officer, a smaller Krex with fresh scars from recent battles, studied the recordings nervously. "General, they fight unlike anything we have encountered. They use coordinated attacks, improvised weapons, and tactics that seem to have no honor or logic." Vex Thule watched human Marines swarming through a Krex ship's corridors. The small creatures moved like a pack of hunting animals. When one fell, others immediately took his place. When their weapons failed, they used pieces of the ship itself as clubs. "Look at this," the general said, pointing to a specific scene. "This human warrior is wounded in the leg, but he continues fighting. Pain should disable him, yet he becomes more dangerous. Perhaps their species has a different relationship with pain, General." "Yes," Vex Thule said slowly. "Send a message to the High Command. Tell them I am personally taking a fleet to deal with these Deathworlders and prepare our best adaptation protocols. We need to study them more carefully. 3 days later, Morrison stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Zephyr Prime. The crystal walls had been reinforced with human-designed armor plating, and weapons stations were hidden throughout the beautiful room. The Zephirians were learning that sometimes beauty needed protection. Dr. Grant was working with Zephirian scientists to understand more about Krek's technology. Her team had been studying the captured ship for days, and their findings were disturbing. "Commander," she said, activating a holographic display, "the Krek's adaptation system is more advanced than we thought. It doesn't just counter weapons, it learns fighting styles, tactical patterns, even individual combat techniques." Professor Newton looked up from his strategic analysis. "That explains why they've been so successful. Every species they fight eventually becomes predictable to them." "But we're not predictable," Sergeant Collins said. He was cleaning his rifle while sitting in a chair that sang softly under his weight. "We change tactics every few minutes." Elder Kethvara approached. Their group, her crystal form dimmer than usual. "Commanders, we have received troubling news. Our intelligence sources report that General Vexithul himself is coming to our system. He commands the largest Krex fleet ever assembled." Morrison set down his coffee cup. The Zephirians had tried to replicate human food and drinks with limited success. "How large are we talking about?" 50 capital ships, 300 support vessels, and over 200,000 Krex warriors. The human officers exchanged glances. Morrison's entire force consisted of 12 ships and about 3,000 personnel. They were outnumbered by more than 100 to 1. "When will they arrive?" Morrison asked. "Our long-range sensors estimate 6 days." Dr. Grant pulled up tactical displays of the approaching fleet. "Commander, this General Vexthul has never been defeated. He's conquered more worlds than any other Krex commander in their history." "Then it's time someone taught him what defeat feels like," Morrison said. "Collins, what's the status of our Marine training program?" Over the past week, Sergeant Collins had been trying to teach Zephirian volunteers basic combat techniques. The results were mixed. The crystalline beings were physically fragile compared to humans, and their peaceful nature made it difficult for them to think in terms of violence. "Sir, they're trying hard, but they're not natural fighters. They keep apologizing when they hit the practice targets. Yesterday, one of them asked if we could negotiate with the training dummies instead of shooting them." Morrison almost smiled. "What about the ones who are making progress? Maybe 50 volunteers who can handle basic weapons. They're good with technical stuff, but they freeze up under pressure." Professor Newton spread tactical charts across the crystal table. "Commander, I've been studying Krex battle patterns from their previous conquests. They always follow the same plan. First, orbital bombardment to destroy military targets. Then, landing forces to occupy population centers. Finally, systematic elimination of resistance." "Predictable," Morrison said. "Amy, what's the status of our ship modifications?" Lieutenant Foster looked up from her technical reports. "The Zephirians have been very helpful, sir. We've managed to integrate some of their shield technology with our armor systems. It's not perfect, but it should help us survive longer in combat." "And the surprise we discussed?" Amy grinned. "Ready to deploy on your orders, Commander." Elder Kethvara listened to the human planning with growing amazement. Where her people saw impossible odds, these Deathworlders saw tactical opportunities. Where the Zephirians calculated certain defeat, the humans planned for victory. "Commander Morrison," she said, "may I ask why you seem confident when facing such overwhelming odds?" Morrison looked around the room at his officers and the Zephirian volunteers. "Elder, my species has a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. I do not understand this reference to canines." "Doctor," Grant translated, "he means that determination and courage matter more than size or numbers. But surely mathematics must be considered. They outnumber you greatly." Morrison stood and walked to the large window that looked out over the crystal city. Zephirian children played in floating gardens while their parents worked in buildings that sang with harmonic frequencies. It was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. "Elder, 300,000 years ago, my ancestors were small creatures. living in caves. Outside those caves were animals 10 times their size with claws like swords and teeth like daggers. By your mathematics, humans should have gone extinct before we learned to make fire. But you survived. We more than survived. We thrived. We turned those deadly predators into house pets and farm animals. We conquered the planet that was trying to kill us every single day. Collins nodded. The commander's right. Humans don't fight fair. We don't give up. And we sure don't run when things get tough. Professor Newton added his own thoughts. The Kreks have adapted to fight every type of warrior they've encountered, but they've never faced survivors. There's a difference. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected the Kreks armada entering the outer edges of the Zephr system. The fleet was massive, stretching across space like a dark cloud of death. General Vexithul's flagship led the formation, its black hull covered in weapons that could destroy cities. Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon, now heavily modified with both human and Zephirian technology. His small fleet was arranged in a defensive formation around Zephr Prime. 12 ships against 350. The odds were impossible by any reasonable calculation. Incoming transmission from the Kreks flagship, Amy reported. Put it on screen. General Vexthul's image filled the main display. He was even more intimidating than the intelligence report suggested. His cybernetic enhancements glowed with red light, and his forearms gestured as he spoke. I am General Vexthul of the Kreks Empire. You are the humans who defeated my scouts. I have come personally to correct this mistake. Morrison stepped forward. This is Commander Morrison. You're not welcome in Coalition space. The general's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Your tiny ships cannot stop me, human. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. Counteroffer, Morrison said calmly. Turn around and go home, and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your entire fleet. Vexithul's eyes burned with rage. You dare mock me? I have conquered worlds and destroyed civilizations. Your species will be extinct before this day ends. We'll see about that, General. The transmission ended. Morrison turned to his crew, all of whom were watching him with complete confidence in their commander. All ships, this is Morrison. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive one. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. The Battle of Zephr Prime began with thunder that shook space itself. General Vexithul's massive fleet opened fire with enough energy to crack a moon. Beams of superheated plasma and particle weapons lit up the darkness like artificial stars. Commander Morrison watched from the bridge of the horizon as the first wave of attack struck his defensive line. The combined human and Zephirian shields flared with brilliant light as they absorbed the incredible energy. Shields holding at 60%, reported Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez from his station. But sir, we can't take many more hits like that. We're not supposed to, Morrison replied calmly. Amy, execute pattern alpha. The human ship suddenly broke formation and scattered in different directions. To the Kreks commanders, it looked like the enemy was running in panic. General Vexthul laughed as he watched the small fleet break apart. They flee like frightened animals, he told his tactical staff. Pursue them. Destroy them one by one. But Morrison wasn't retreating. He was drawing the Kreks fleet into the asteroid field that surrounded Zephr Prime. The human ships moved between the floating rocks like they had trained for this exact moment. Lieutenant Commander Nina Walsh had spent days mapping every asteroid, every piece of debris, every gravitational current in the field. Now that knowledge became a weapon. Kreks cruiser closing on our starboard side, reported Corporal Kate Murphy from Weapons Control. Range, 2,000 meters. Wait for it, Morrison said, watching his tactical display. The Kreks ship was pursuing them between two large asteroids, just as he had hoped. Now, Kate. Murphy pressed the firing button, but instead of shooting at the Kreks ship, the human weapons hit the asteroids on both sides of their enemy. Thousands of tons of rock collapsed onto the alien vessel, crushing its hull like an empty can. One down, Morrison said. 49 to go. Across the battlefield, the other human ships were using similar tactics. They turned the asteroid field into a maze where their smaller, more maneuverable vessels had every advantage. The massive Krex ships found themselves trapped between rocks, unable to use their superior numbers effectively. Dr. Steve Parker watched from the medical bay as wounded crew members were brought in. The battle was going better than expected, but it was far from over. Through the small window, he could see Krex fighters swarming around the human ships like angry insects. "Doctor," called one of his assistants, "we're receiving casualties from the Jefferson. Their medical bay was hit." Parker nodded grimly. War always had a cost, and humans were paying it with their blood, but they were still fighting, still winning against impossible odds. On the planet's surface, Major Sam Davis was preparing for the next phase of the battle. Intelligence reports suggested that General Vexathul would eventually land ground forces, and Davis wanted to be ready. The crystal cities of Zephr Prime had been transformed over the past week. What looked like beautiful, peaceful architecture now concealed weapons, traps, and defensive positions. The Zephirians had learned quickly that sometimes survival required ugly choices. Major called Sergeant First Class Dan Cooper from his sniper position. "I've got visual on Krex landing ships approaching the northern district." Davis activated his communication system. "All units, this is command. The party is starting. Remember what we practiced. 200,000 Krex warriors descended from the sky in massive landing craft. Each soldier was 8 feet tall, heavily armored, and armed with weapons that could punch through tank armor. They had never been defeated in ground combat. They landed expecting to face the fragile Zephirians and a handful of human soldiers. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully prepared killing ground. The crystal streets that sang so beautifully could also explode when the right frequency was triggered. The floating gardens contained hidden weapons that emerged when sensors detected enemy movement. Even the buildings themselves had been turned into fortresses. Colonel Matt Brooks led the main human force from a command post deep inside the largest Crystal Spire. He was a veteran of urban warfare, and he had spent days teaching the Zephirians everything he knew about fighting in cities. "Remember," he told his mixed force of humans and alien volunteers, "we don't have to kill all of them. We just have to make them afraid to keep coming." The first Krex assault wave charged through the crystal streets with confidence. They had done this hundreds of times before on dozens of different worlds, but they had never fought in a city that fought back. Sergeant Cooper's rifle spoke from a hidden position high in the crystal spires. His target, a Krex squad leader, dropped without warning. Before the aliens could locate the sniper, Cooper had moved to a different position and fired again. The Krex adapted quickly, as they always did. They began using heavier weapons to destroy the buildings where snipers might hide. But when they fired at one crystal tower, 3 others would light up with return fire. Captain Lucy Turner led her fighter squadron in atmospheric combat above the city. Her pilots had trained for weeks to use Zephr Prime's unique weather patterns as weapons. The gas giant storms created wind currents that could slam aircraft into mountains if pilots didn't know how to ride them. The Krex fighters were fast and heavily armed, but their pilots had never flown in weather that changed every few minutes. Turner led them into a storm front that was building over the northern continent, then used the hurricane-force winds to slam enemy ships into the crystalline mountains. "This is Turner to all squadrons," she broadcast over the radio. "The weather is our friend today. Use it." Back in space, the orbital battle had turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse. General Vexathul's flagship was too large to enter the asteroid field, so he was forced to send smaller ships to hunt down the humans. But every time a Krex vessel entered the maze of floating rocks, it faced the same problem. The humans knew every hiding place, every trap, every way to turn the environment into a weapon. Morrison's ship, the Horizon, had taken heavy damage but was still fighting. Half his crew was wounded, his shields were down to 20%, and his weapons were running low on ammunition. "Sir," reported Tony Rodriguez, "we've got a Krex battlecruiser coming straight at us. No cover between here and there." Morrison looked at his tactical display. The enemy ship was twice the size of his vessel and armed with enough weapons to destroy a city. In a fair fight, the Horizon wouldn't last 30 seconds. "Tony, What's the status on our special modification? Ready? To deploy, sir. But we only get one shot at this. Then let's make it count. Amy, take us straight at them. Lieutenant Foster's hands flew over her controls. Sir, that's suicide. No, Amy, that's human. The Horizon accelerated directly toward the Krex battlecruiser. To the alien crew, it looked like a desperate ramming attack. They prepared to destroy the small ship with concentrated fire. What they didn't expect was for the human vessel to suddenly split apart. The modification that Amy had prepared was simple, but effective. The Horizon's hull could separate into 3 sections, each with its own engines and weapons. Instead of facing one target, the Krex suddenly had 3 ships attacking from different angles. The battlecruiser's adaptation systems tried to counter this new threat, but they were designed to handle predictable enemy behavior. Humans, as always, refused to be predictable. Morrison, S section of the ship fired railgun rounds at the enemy's engines, while Amy's section attacked with missiles. The third section, commanded by Henderson, used the distraction to ram directly into the battlecruiser's bridge. The massive Krex ship shuddered and began to list to one side. Its weapons fell silent, and secondary explosions lit up its hull. Target destroyed, Morrison reported to his scattered fleet. All ships, regroup, at Rally Point Delta. But even as his crews celebrated their victory, Morrison knew the battle was far from over. General Vexithul still had most of his fleet, and the Krex commander was learning from each defeat. On his flagship, the general studied the battle recordings with growing respect for his enemies. These humans fought unlike anything in his experience. They were unpredictable, creative, and absolutely refused to surrender even when facing certain death. Fascinating, he said to his tactical officer. They turn weakness into strength and use our own expectations against us. Orders, General? Vexthul smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Signal the fleet. All ships are to target the planet directly. If we cannot defeat these humans in honorable combat, we will destroy everything they are trying to protect. The real test was about to begin. General Vexthul's order changed everything. The remaining Krex ships turned their weapons toward Zephr Prime itself. Energy beams that could melt mountains began raining down on the crystal cities. The beautiful floating structures that had taken centuries to build started cracking and falling into the gas giant's crushing atmosphere. Commander Morrison watched in horror from his damaged ship. They're targeting civilians, he said over the communication system. All ships, we have to stop them. But the human fleet was scattered and wounded. Half their ships were too damaged to fight effectively. They had won several battles but were losing the war. Elder Kethvera's voice reached Morrison from the planet's surface. Her crystal form was cracking under the stress of watching her people die. Commander, our evacuation ships cannot escape. The Krex are destroying them as they launch. Morrison looked at his tactical display. 30 Krex ships were in orbit, systematically destroying everything on the planet. His remaining vessels couldn't possibly stop them all. Sir, called Dr. Grant from her station, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Krex flagship. Whatever they're charging, it's big enough to crack the planet's crust. Morrison made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. All ships form up on me. We're going after their flagship. Commander, Professor Newton said over the radio. That ship has more firepower than our entire fleet combined. It's suicide. Maybe, Morrison replied, but it's also the only chance those people have. And humans don't abandon their friends. The battered human fleet limped toward General Vexthul's massive flagship. The alien vessel was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that had never been broken. On the planet's surface, the battle had turned into a nightmare of urban warfare. Krex warriors poured through the crystal streets, destroying everything in their path. But they were learning that conquering a city defended by humans was different from their previous easy victories. Colonel Brooks had turned every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. His forces struck from hidden positions, then disappeared before the Krex could respond. When the aliens adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Sergeant Cooper had moved his sniper position 6 times in the past hour. Each time the Krex located him, he was already gone. His rifle had claimed dozens of enemy squad leaders, causing confusion in their ranks. "Brooks to all units," the colonel broadcast. "The enemy is getting frustrated. They're starting to make mistakes. Keep the pressure on." In the crystal spires, Zephirian volunteers were discovering courage they never knew they had. These peaceful beings who had never hurt anything in their lives were now fighting desperately to save their families. One group of Zephirians had learned to use their city's own crystal resonance as a weapon. When they sang in harmony, they could shatter Krek's armor and weapons. The alien warriors had adapted to energy beams and explosives, but they had never faced weaponized music. Captain Turner's fighter squadron was down to 3 aircraft, but they were still fighting. She led her remaining pilots through the crystal canyons, using the city's architecture to hide from enemy sensors. "Turner to ground forces," she called over her radio. "We've got Krek's reinforcements landing in Sector 7. 2,000 troops, heavy weapons." "Copy that, Turner, we'll handle it." But everyone knew they were running out of time and ammunition. The humans were fighting harder than any species in galactic history, but they were still vastly outnumbered. In space, Morrison's fleet approached the Krek's flagship like insects attacking a giant. The alien ship's defensive weapons lit up space as they tried to swat down the approaching humans. "Incoming transmission from General Vexithul," Amy reported. Morrison nodded. "Put him on screen." The Krek's commander's image filled the display. His forearms gestured angrily as he spoke. "Human commander, your resistance is admirable but pointless. Withdraw your ships, and I will give you a warrior's death." "Counteroffer," Morrison said. "Surrender now and we'll let you leave with your lives." Vexthul laughed, but there was less confidence in it than before. "You have lost, human. My weapon will crack this planet in half. Your allies will die screaming. General, you've been fighting civilizations that gave up when things got tough. You've never faced a species that fights harder when cornered. Words will not save you." Morrison smiled grimly. "No, but this might." He nodded to Tony Rodriguez, who activated the Horizon's final surprise. Every human ship suddenly accelerated to maximum speed, their engines glowing white-hot with overload. The Kreks expected another ramming attack and prepared their defenses. Instead, the human ships scattered at the last second, each one targeting a different section of the massive flagship. But Morrison's ship didn't change course. The Horizon flew straight toward the flagship's main weapon array, the massive cannon that could destroy planets. "Sir," Amy called out, "collision in 30 seconds. We should evacuate to the escape pods." "Negative," Morrison replied. "We finish this together." The Horizon struck the Krek's weapon system at full speed. The explosion lit up half the star system as the flagship's main gun tore itself apart. Without their ultimate weapon, the Kreks could no longer threaten to destroy the planet. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Horizon was gone, and with it, Commander Morrison and most of his crew. Dr. Grant had transferred to another ship before the final attack. Now she found herself in command of what remained of the human fleet. Through her tears, she continued the fight that Morrison had started. "All ships," she broadcast. "The commander gave us a chance. Let's not waste it." The battle turned into a close-range brawl between the remaining human vessels and the Krek's fleet. Ships rammed each other, crews fought in damaged corridors, and both sides pushed their technology to the breaking point. On General Vexithul's bridge, alarms were screaming. His flagship was badly damaged, half his fleet was destroyed, and his ground forces were reporting heavy casualties on the planet. "General," his tactical officer reported, "our adaptation systems are being overwhelmed. The humans change tactics faster than we can counter them." For the first time in his military career, Vexthul was facing defeat. These small creatures from a distant world had done what no other species had managed. They had beaten the Krek's empire in open combat. But the general had one final card to play. "Signal the retreat," he ordered. His remaining ships began to pull back, gathering around the damaged flagship. The humans had won, but at tremendous cost. Most of their ships were destroyed, and thousands of brave soldiers were dead. Dr. Grant watched the Krek's fleet preparing to leave. Part of her wanted to let them go. The battle was over, and her people had paid enough in blood. But then she remembered Morrison's words about protecting friends and finishing fights. "All ships," she ordered, "pursue and engage. We don't let them escape to attack someone else." The final phase of the battle was swift and decisive. The damaged Krex ships couldn't outrun their pursuers, and their adaptation systems were still overloaded from the previous fighting. One by one, the alien vessels were destroyed or forced to surrender. General Vexithul's flagship was the last to fall, its massive hull finally cracking under concentrated fire from the remaining human ships. In the wreckage of his command bridge, the general sent his final transmission. "You have won this day, humans, but the Krex Empire is vast. Others will come." Dr. Grant responded from her ship's bridge. "Let them come. The galaxy knows now that the Krex can be beaten, and Earth will be ready." The Battle of Zephyr Prime was over. The crystal cities were damaged but still standing. The Zephirian people had survived, and with them the hope for peace in the galaxy. Elder Kethvara stood in the ruins of her council chambers, looking up at the stars where human ships still patrolled. Her crystal form was cracked but healing, and her voice carried new strength. "Dr. Grant," she said over the communication system, "how can we ever repay what your people have done for us?" Grant looked around at her exhausted crew. They were wounded and tired, but they were alive, and they had proven something important to the galaxy. "Elder," she replied, "you already have. You trusted us when others wouldn't. You let us show the galaxy what humans can do when we're fighting for something worth protecting." In the months that followed, word of the human victory spread throughout space. The Krex Empire, shaken by their first major defeat, retreated to their home systems. Other aggressive species reconsidered their plans for conquest when they heard about the Deathworlders, who fought like demons when defending their friends. The Zephirian coalition established the first joint military academy with Earth, combining human tactical knowledge with alien technology. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the best defenders were those who came from the worst neighborhoods. And in the space around Zephyr Prime, human patrol ships continued their watch, making sure that the stars remained safe. For those who chose peace over war, the Deathworlders had found their place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as guardians.